Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Got a Case of Wanderlust podcast, your show dedicated to all things travel, specifically solo female travel. And today I'm here with solo female traveler Shania Stewart, who also goes by Kia, who was born in South Africa, raised in Switzerland. So, Shania started backpacking when she was 18 after deciding to take a gap year before university. And since then, she has solo traveled to dozens of countries, and so I can't wait to get into our chat. So, with that, welcome to the show, Shania.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So, I always start out with this one question, which is what sparked your wanderlust?
I think it was the combination of my upbringing, to be honest, being born in such a completely different culture, and then, of course, despite the move, still growing up in a household where that South African culture dominated, and then just having this contrast to Swiss culture where not everything that I was really felt aligned with where I physically was. So I always had this kind of curiosity, what else was there, and if there was a place where just everything seemed to align. So there was this natural curiosity. And then my parents fostered that curiosity by being backpackers when they were young and telling me all their crazy stories and me growing up around their backpacker friends. And yeah, it came very natural, to be honest.
Okay. And then, was that what kind of inspired your gap year? The fact that your parents were backpackers, or what was that inspiration?
Honestly, I never did poorly in school, but I never really liked it. So I always knew for mental health reasons, I should definitely do a gap year between high school and university just to get a break. And I think it was more me wanting to have a degree, me wanting to go to university, but wanting to just experience life fully and completely without the routines and the restriction that such a system offers before going back into it.
Absolutely. I think many people share that same sentiment, but it's kind of not culturally acceptable in depending on where you are yet. So how difficult was the decision to take time off from school for you? And the follow-up question would be, how have you changed as a person since then?
Well, I'd say Switzerland is a very unique country when it comes to accepting gap years in the sense that it isn't very common for people to do. However, the privilege that comes with being born in Switzerland is undisputable. So the ability to go travel is very much there. So I say people are surprised, but they're not necessarily negatively inclined towards that decision. Especially again in the household. My brother did a gap year, my parents traveled, it was very much supported. So for me, it was a very easy step to take this decision and then also get the supports from it. And then about the change, honestly, I think I just completely changed as a person. I don't think there's a single aspect that remains the same now, even just opinions. And it's not that I'm just a completely different person, but I say I'm just far more balanced. I think, especially when you grow up in a system like Switzerland where efficiency and structure is so central, it is very easy to become rigid and you have all these built up emotions that aren't necessarily societally accepted to let out. And then traveling, you just become more balanced, it's easier to adapt, you just realize that everything's going to work out even if it hasn't the way you planned, and it's going to be fine after all. So I'd say I'm far happier, far more balanced, just more flexible, I think.
Absolutely. The trust you just gained from traveling, the trust in life, that's really wonderful. And so, can before we dive into your travel experiences while doing the gap year, do you have any, I guess, thing you'd like to share, like a PSA towards maybe, I don't know, parents who are listening, or just maybe kids who are thinking of taking a gap year who could like share this audio with their parents who may be like hesitant to accept this decision to, take time off and not pursue the traditional quote unquote path to career?
I think when parents are hesitant towards their children doing a gap year, it stems from two main sources. One, of course, the worry for your child because it is an unknown environment. And I think everyone that travels can agree that it is a very extreme environment. And then, of course, with the academic path, they're worried about losing time. And I think when it comes to losing time, that is definitely with me something that actually it won me time to go traveling because I changed so much. It shifted my perspective so much, despite me knowing all my life what I wanted to do or seemingly knowing. So after traveling, I realized it was in fact not what I wanted to do. And the fact that I took 2.5 years to figure that out instead of paying so much money to study and then realizing this degree is not what I want to do with my life, I actually gained time. So I think that is a very valuable thing to assess, that even when you know what you want to do, it is always beneficial to take a step back and just experience, and then you'll probably reposition at one point. And then regarding your safety, I mean, I understand. Even my parents that did it as well were really worried. But nowadays, you have such possibility with communication that you can keep them informed. And I think one of the most vital things when it comes to your child's happiness and success is them being confident in their own abilities. And I have never experienced anything so confident boosting as traveling, because you're on your own and you just need to figure things out, and it takes you about, I'd say, a month where you're just a little bit terrified of everything, a little bit overwhelmed, and then you'll just figure it out and you come back so much more confident and ready to take on everything else.
I completely feel your energy for life through this screen, and I love whenever I talk to passionate travelers, this is what I feel. And like, just going back to the transformative effect of travel and how you mentioned it actually helps you gain time, even though it's thought of or looked at as something that makes you lose time because you're taking a break. So let's talk about what you did during your gap year. What exactly did you do during these 2.5 years?
Well, honestly, I had a very extensive plan. None of it worked out, but it was amazing nonetheless. I made a habit of working, so volunteering in places through websites such as Wellpackers. Um, and I usually volunteered at hostels, or I went to join an environmental organization in Norway where we picked up trash from the beaches and out of the ocean and held sustainability lectures. I worked as a medical assistant in the Guatemalan jungle, building infrastructures for women with single parents with children. I volunteered as a surf coach in Costa Rica. I worked with camels in the Moroccan desert. Honestly, everything random that just seemed like a great experience, I tried. And I have to say, I'm a really big fan of the volunteering system. Not only do you save money, but I think it is truly a way to find the most long-lasting, brilliant, kind friends that you'll ever make in life. Honestly.
And so, which of these work exchanges, if you like had to choose, transformed you the most?
I think, oh, it's difficult. I think the most transformative when it comes to just perspective was the one where I worked in Norway with NMF, because you just saw the effects that you have in the environment, and you were with such simple people, not in a sense of complexity, but they were happy with so little and they invested their entire life to just something that they believed in, whether it's necessarily the environment that you believe in or not. Just giving yourself completely to something that you're so passionate about was really, really transformative for me to see. And it was the first, as it was my first experience, it was the first time of me kind of gaining a family around strangers and a common purpose. So that was very, very intriguing and beautiful. And then probably the project or the work that I did that just changed me the most as the person that I already was me volunteering in Scotland, in a plethora of different hostels, just because it brought out so many things about myself that I now love, but I never used to be confident enough to express.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. So, how long were these work exchanges? Like, on average, how long did you participate?
So usually it's about 4 weeks. That's kind of the minimum requirement. I stuck to those 4 weeks predominantly because I wanted to see a lot of great places. And I'm always kind of the opinion leave a place when it's still great so you can always come back.
Hmm.
Um, and then some certain projects like the hostels in Scotland, I just kept coming back. So those extended into over half a year probably at one point.
Oh my gosh. So you lived in a hostel for half a year.
Yeah, probably like longer if you consider all the different hostels strung together, but in that one hostel, probably, yeah.
Okay, wait. I want to learn more about this working in a hostel for long term because this is something that I'm personally interested in and I know many other people are as well. But being a guest is obviously very different than working in one, and I've never stayed in a hostel, I guess hopping for more than a month. So how comfortable is it first of all to be in a hostel for this long? Because you're sharing your room, you're sharing everything.
I think it really depends on how the hostel is built out, particularly when you have a hostel that also has other people that stay there for longer, or generally just manages to build such a profound loyalty amongst the volunteers. It is just an incredible experience. Yes, sometimes the dorm is messy, the dorm is tiny, you always have to share. There's always something going on, even when you need time for yourself, which can be overwhelming. But all in all, it's basically living with your best friends in this awesome place where you can just walk out to the kitchen and find a new friend in 10 seconds because of all the cool guests and like minded people. It is just honestly, I've never felt as loved and supported as in that time. It is just an absolutely phenomenal experience. And I had the upside, so I worked for my backpackers in Scotland, and it is basically a hostel chain. So they have different hostels and they're all completely unique. However, they function over the same pair of owners. So you could jump between hostels. So when you needed a break from Edinburgh and the city, you could just go work in a little woodlock cabin on the locks of Loch Ness, and it was fine. They were so supportive, and I think the coolest thing as well is, as I mentioned, they created this loyalty to with other volunteers. So every time you came back, you knew half of them already because everyone just keeps coming back. So you have this extended network of a couple of hundred people, and you just keep meeting each other, and it's great.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. Like such a wholesome experience to have in your life. How long did it take for you to have this community feel for it to really feel like you're living with your family?
Honestly, I wouldn't say necessarily longer than a week. I was the first time I came, I was very fortunate in the sense of they were just redoing the entire atmosphere and vibe of the hostel. So we had a new manager and a new assistant manager, and they were just such loving, sweet people. They instantly took you up and they made sure that you were this family. And they chose the volunteers also in a way that they would get on with each other. So very unique, different people, but everyone with same kind of passion for life. So it was very, very easy to fit in. And everyone was new at one point. So everyone made an effort that the new people would instantly be invited to whatever we were doing. So I'd say that process is very unique depending on the hostel and management that you have. But all in all, because it's based on volunteers that have experienced the same thing, it's very easy to feel included.
Hmm. Okay. Well, it sounds like you chose this experience well, or it chose you. Like it all worked out the way it was meant to. And so, what about Scotland? I guess made you want to stay in this country because I mean, obviously the people made you want to stay, but you also kind of have to like the place you're in to want to stay as well. So, can you describe Scottish culture?
I think the most unique about Scottish culture is that it's this incredibly harsh, cold, almost grey environment. But because of the people and the cozy little cafes and pubs and just overall friendliness and generosity of the Scottish people, it just becomes somehow the most warmest culture you'll ever find. It is so easy to just feel content. I've never met anyone that went to Scotland and somehow wasn't affected on a very profound level almost. It's just, yeah, it's crazy. And honestly, it also just felt like home. I feel like with a lot of South African culture stemming from Great Britain, it felt like my family from the second I got there with the rugged humor and the directness and the bluntness, but still the kindness. It was just, yeah, felt like home.
I love that. And how, I guess, how quickly did you adjust to your new environment, to the culture? Were there any cultural, like, surprises or shocks that you experienced at first?
I wouldn't say necessarily because those cultural shocks I've already experienced in my own family. I think you have very different ways of communicating. Like in Switzerland, you're very polite. If you want something and stuff like that, you're being very cautious about it. But still, there's a certain bluntness. So you will directly express what you want in a very friendly manner. And in British South African culture, there's a lot more of the old mannerisms where you are very blunt in certain situations, but specifically when it comes to requests, you tend to hint at it and wait for the other person to pick it up, and you leave your bluntness for something else. And I've experienced that growing up, and Scotland is the same. So you hint at something, and everything's a bit loosey goosey, and you don't exactly do everything that you say. You don't mean everything that you say, but it's this friendliness, it's this charm. And yeah, I experienced that with my father, with my South African grandparents. So I kind of knew what I was in for, but it definitely took some time to actually understand the accent.
Yeah, the communication is always like you kind of have to navigate that without fully knowing what to expect. 'Cause the only way to understand is to like be there, um, and that's kind of surprising. That you mentioned Scottish people are one of the warmest people. I've heard the same, like they're very friendly, but when you think of northern countries, especially colder climates, they're kind of known to be more reserved, which is like the opposite of what you're saying.
I think that's the really unique part about the Northern Hemisphere. Usually in Scandinavia, I've experienced the same thing, very reserved. And I think in Scotland, because there's just so much roughness when it comes to history, when it comes to the landscape, there's just no more room for it. They're so warm and just welcoming. I agree with you. It's a very unique thing I wouldn't have expected as well, but somehow just the kindest, sweetest people with their little thorny shell. But once you get past that,
Okay, and for travelers going to Scotland, do you have any advice you would give for like places to visit, things they should know beforehand?
I think Scotland is a hidden gem, to be honest, but it's also one of the few places I found that the really, really famous, notorious tourist places are absolutely worth visiting. So Scotland has a lot of tourists, especially increasing over the time, but it is still not completely overrun by tourists. So Glencoe, definitely a must. Lochside Hostel, which is on the banks of Loch Ness, which I experienced and I worked there, and it's really kind of an experience in of itself. I think Scotland is very unique with the fact that they really have one of the best hostel culture, and you wouldn't expect it. So definitely stay at the Mac Backpackers hostels. They're so warm, they're so friendly, they always have events. It's so easy to find friends and feel included there. Places, again, you can't really go wrong. Even if you don't have that much time, stick to the touristic places. They're still absolutely worth it. If you have a little more time, Isle of Rum is incredibly underrated, beautiful, and maybe particularly important for budget travelers and backpackers is the fact that Scotland has a terrible public transport system in the Highlands. It's really bad. It's expensive. In summer, it's usually overbooked, so you need to plan ahead. But hitchhiking is, of course, it always comes with a risk. Always follow your gut feeling, be prepared. But all in all, it's a very common thing that happens in the Highlands. I've traveled across the entire Highlands, just avoiding basically going out of big cities. But once you're out, I've traveled all around the country and I've met the most beautiful, kind people. It's a very, very easy, safe thing to do in Scotland in relativity to other places.
Wow, okay. So you traveled throughout the whole island. Is that accessible or doable for someone visiting the first time? Or like how much time would you recommend?
I think Scotland has places around every corner where you want to stop and just take in the views. So as I mentioned, I've been there for over 6 months altogether, and I feel like I haven't seen anything. So honestly, when it comes to duration, I don't think there's an end. And I think something that you definitely the big ones that you definitely need to see is Isle of Skye, Glencoe, and definitely Edinburgh. And I think about 1.5, 2 weeks minimum to kind of experience those, especially with the weather, since you never really know what it's going to be, having a little bit of leeway with time. So you can spend a day that is absolutely horrendous and cool, just cozying up in a cafe as well, is a good idea.
And when is the best time to visit if you had to like kind of beat the bad weather as best as possible?
I don't think, I mean, in summer you definitely have less rain. However, you have the midges, which are horrendous little mosquitoes. So I wouldn't recommend the peak of summer. I think my favorite time to visit Scotland is in autumn, not necessarily because you can avoid the kind of gloomy weather, but everything is gonna be red. It looks when the sun shines, it looks oh Lord, when the sun shines, it looks like everything's on fire. You have the Scottish wild heather climbing up on all the hills, and the grass is really golden at that time, and you just have the most insane colors. And then when you get the gloomy weather and you're not fortunate enough to have the sun, it's just magical in a completely different way because you have the fog rolling over it. So I think it's the perfect month to kind of experience all the cliches that you think of Scotland when you think of its weather and landscape. And there's not a weather that won't look magical during that time.
I absolutely love the way you described it. I feel like I just got transported into a painting or something. You have a really like artistic view like of life. I could see based off your Instagram. I wanted to shout that out. Like your whole feed looks like I don't know, like a retro Polaroid slideshow. I love it.
Thank you so much.
And I guess last thing to talk about Scotland. I know we're only scratching the surface, but how would you describe the food? What were some of your favorite things to eat when you were there?
I, I think Scotland is not known for its food, and I have to admit that I kind of agree with that notion. I don't think I don't think Scotland is the best place to visit culinarily wise. Like obviously, I tried black pudding, I tried haggis. Um, Honestly, not bad. Also, great fish and chips, amazing scones, great tea. But I'd say the list is very limited. The
Mm.
good thing with Scotland is that I'd say the basic foods that you're gonna find in the entire country, such as scones, are just so lovely and simple. I don't think anyone wouldn't like it. And then the very particular foods such as haggis, um, you can avoid it very easily because Scotland is so, I say, welcoming to foreigners and tourists. They have honestly a great blend of foods that you can just try. And yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, so what you're saying is you tried to eat international food because there was limited Scottish food options.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I try to, I think it's important to try the local cuisine, and that is in fact really good. But a lot of it, I understand why people don't like it, and then it's very easy to kind of avoid the foods that you don't like. So it's very simple to still feel very satisfied with the food that you eat.
Okay, cool, cool. Good to know. And so we'll move into the rapid fire round, and I kind of want to tweak it because we'll make it the Scottish edition. And I'm just gonna come up with these off the top of my head. So the first one is, what is your favorite Scottish tradition, or like something you did regularly when you were there?
Definitely Ceilidh dancing. I was in a hostel that was very pro Ceilidh dancing. They had events that did it all the time, including the hostels in the Highlands. And it's just traditional folk dancing. And you'd gather around, everyone had a good time, you drink together, you dance together. You look absolutely stupid doing it because you definitely aren't doing it with the same elegance, but it's just great fun.
That sounds so wholesome and lovely. I love when dancing is part of cultures. I think it's something that's been lost with the US, at least. But I know it's very prevalent in other parts of the world, so that's amazing. Secondly, what is one of your least favorite things about Scottish culture? Like something that maybe annoyed you, or like you couldn't quite get behind?
Um, oh, that's a difficult one, honestly. I really just adore Scotland as a whole. I think something that I struggle in general is that, as I said, I don't necessarily align with Swiss culture and all its premises, but I am very Swiss when it comes to punctuality and efficiency. And what drove me absolutely insane was just the public transport system in Scotland, especially trains. Never work, never on time. There's always something going wrong. People are always kind of late and laid back, which is
Hmm.
great as a traveler. If you have to work, sometimes get a bit frustrated.
It's yeah, I feel like that's very common on island cultures, right? Like kind of the relaxed attitude, even if it's in the north, I guess.
Definitely.
Okay, and then last question would be, if you could transport into one of your memories you had in Scotland, what moment in time would it be? I know this is not really a good rapid fire question, it's kind of difficult, but if you had to choose one moment.
Hmm. I think I think one of the most beautiful memories, just because it captures what it's like to work in a hostel, was when all the volunteers and a couple of guests that we've befriended, we just went down to Portobello Beach, which is the beach in Edinburgh, and we built this gigantic bonfire, which in summer everyone does. So it just the entire beach is freckled with these little bonfires and people sitting around it having a great time. And my friend Sarah was playing the ukulele, and there was the sunset, which is phenomenal in Scotland, especially in late spring, early summer, because it never gets completely dark. You always have this yellowish horizon. So the sunset goes forever, and we were just dancing around the fire to the music, and then talking, grilling marshmallows, drinking beer, and yeah, just talking about our experience traveling. It was great.
Hmm. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Shania. This concludes our interview. Um, I'll put your Instagram in the show notes so people could check out your amazing feed. But yeah, I really appreciate our chat.
Thank you so, so much again for having me. It was really fun.
Thank you so much for listening to the Gotta Case Wanderlust podcast. Again, my name is Lydia, and you can find me on social media in the About section of this podcast. Please rate and review if you found value or insight from this, and I hope to see you in the next episode.